This original WSRE presentation is made possible by viewers like you. Thank you.
Florida comes out a winner in the latest national head count. Hello, I'm Lloyd Patterson. This is Connecting the Community, CTC, zeroing in on reapportionment, the process of drawing political boundaries. Population shifts to the south and west mean Florida will be picking up 2 more seats in Congress. Texas gets 4 more. Georgia, South Carolina, Utah, Washington, Nevada, and Arizona also pick up 1 more seat. Now, New York's delegation shrinks by 2, as does Ohio's, with several states losing 1 seat. Illinois, Ohio, Iowa, Louisiana, Massachusetts, Missouri, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. Florida will have 27 representatives in the House. Where will those districts be? Whose district will they be taken out of? Who's going to win? Who's going to lose? Well, 2 Northwest Florida lawmakers have a big role in the reapportionment debate. Senator Don Gates of Niceville is heading the Senate Committee on Reapportionment, while fellow Republican Senator Greg Evers is a member of the committee. We welcome you both to the program. Thank you for making time for this. How did you view the news that Florida is going to be getting 2 new seats in Congress?
Go ahead.
No, you go.
Well, it was good news for Florida, Lloyd. I'll tell you, anytime we can pick up more members in the House of Representatives, that means Florida has a greater influence on every area of national policy. And here in Northwest Florida, when we are concerned about BRAC, when we're concerned about military spending and military issues, having more representatives in Congress means a lot to Florida. But the other implication is that now Florida will have 29 electoral votes. That makes us far more important in the election of the next president. It makes Florida a place that anybody who wants to be president must win.
It puts it even more in play for the people who want to be running for president. For instance, they should be putting more face time in Florida, do you think?
I think all of the candidates in the upcoming election, presidential election, will be coming and spending a lot of face time in Florida, and not only in the part that hangs down on Florida, but also across northern Florida.
Now, you will be working on drawing those lines that determine who's going to be voting in what district. And some people say this is insider stuff, but this is really the meat and potatoes of politics, isn't it? The reapportionment process. How do you view it?
Well, you know, it certainly can be viewed as inside baseball, but our Senate President, Mike Herodopoulos, has directed that we would have the most open, transparent, interactive redistricting process in America. Florida already wins national awards for the fairness of our redistricting process. But this year, we will enter a 2-year process that will include public hearings in every part of the state, including here in Northwest Florida, so that we can hear people's views, not just about whether or not they think they're in the right congressional or Senate or House district, but where their communities of interest are. Because county lines and city lines, important as they are drawn by politicians. But people trade back and forth, they go to church back and forth, they go to ball games back and forth across communities of interest. And we'll be very interested in making sure that people who worship together, who trade together, who play together, have an opportunity to vote together.
And Greg Evers, how do you view the reapportionment process?
Lloyd, and I want to thank President Herodopoulos for his openness and for giving us the opportunity to have these meetings all across the state. From even, we're putting up a website that you can go on the website, and each individual will be able to sit at their home computer and work out how they feel the district line should look. So you're talking about not only an open process, but we're allowing the residents, our constituents here in the state of Florida, to actually participate and actually draw the maps for us, which will give each individual a lot more input.
And Lloyd, that's so important, what Senator Evers just said. That's never happened in America before, where all of the demographic information, block by block, city block by city block, will be spread out on the internet so people can see where everyone lives. And then the district builder software will be overlaid over the demographic information. So just as Senator Evers said, if you're in Sarasota or if you're in Baker, you'll be able to sit down and say, well, where does it make sense to me that lines be drawn? And then you'll also be able to have applied the criteria that the House and the Senate have to use. We can't draw districts that are wildly disproportionate in population. They have to be very close to equal. Congressional districts have to be exactly equal. There have been congressional districts in the United States thrown out by the federal courts when there have been 11 more people in one district as compared to the neighboring district. And then we've got other kinds of requirements that we have to live by. The Federal Voting Rights Act, and also now we have new state requirements that we need to live by that the voters added to the Florida Constitution. We want all of this to be open and transparent. Our Senate President wants to invite 19 million Floridians to be auditors and participators in this process.
There is a lot of criticism coming toward Governor Scott and Republicans about the fact that the governor seems to have put this on sort of a back burner, starting the reapportionment process. How do you react to those who say, look, you guys you're putting the brakes on this before it even gets started?
Well, it takes 2 years by the time you start with getting the demographic information from the Bureau of the Census, which we won't get. We won't get the block-by-block information until April or May. And then we want to put the district builder, as Senator Evers said, on the website. Then we will hold hearings in Tallahassee and around the state. And we're required by the Florida Constitution to go into session early in 2012, in January, to begin showing the public what the results of our public hearings and the input we've received from not just interest groups and politicians, but ordinary folks who live in neighborhoods. It takes that period of time. Now, what the governor's done is he said before we pre-clear with the Justice Department Amendments 5 and 6, let's make sure that we articulate some of the questions that have been raised about 5 and 6. It's really a sideshow because what Greg and I are concerned with, the only pre-clearance we care about at the end of the day, is that the final maps that are developed as a result of all this public input have to be pre-cleared at the federal level before we can go to the state Supreme Court and have them review it. So that's the pre-clearance that really matters, not the pre-clearance of Amendments 5 and 6.
Let's take a look at just a few bullet labels for Amendments 5 and 6, what exactly they do, which were passed by voters in the last election. First of all, that the amendments say there can be no political favoritism, that there has to be equality, has to be respected racially and language-wise, and that the districts include contiguous borders, which I guess would eliminate snaking a district line down a highway 10 miles to pick up some other area for political reasons. Is that, how much different is that from what's happened in the past?
Well, let me take a shot at it and then defer to Senator Evers. The new applications that we have to be aware of have to do with what's called political favoritism. But let me quote from the Constitution, from the amendments that we as voters adopted. The amendments say, no line can be drawn with the intent of either favoring or disfavoring any incumbent or any political party. Now, we've always had to deal with compactness and contiguity and appropriate apportionment so we don't have too many people in one district and not enough people in another. But imagine now, think it through. No line can be drawn with the intent of favoring or disfavoring any incumbent or any political party. Greg and I have districts that are next to each other.
Yes.
And we're friends and we're members of the Republican Party, both of us. Greg represents the northern tier of Northwest Florida. I represent the southern tier along the coast. Now, if we move lines, which we'll have to move because more people have moved into our area in the last 10 years, if you move one single line, in Okaloosa County, where I've won 4 countywide elections, and let's say you give me more of the northern part of Okaloosa County, well, does that disfavor Senator Evers, who lives there, if I have a greater share of his home turf? Does it favor me because I've won 4 elections in North Okaloosa County? Well, what it really does, unfortunately, many people say, is to create the basis for lots of lawsuits where lots of people, politicians can be suing, interest groups can be suing, individual citizens can be suing, because it's pretty hard to move a line where you don't favor or disfavor anybody. But that's what Amendments 5 and 6 say, and that creates an extra burden for us as Senator Evers and I and the other members of our Reapportionment Committee work on this problem.
Have you also been uncomfortable with that language, Senator Evers?
Well, absolutely, from the standpoint that, you know, we are so uncomfortable. Well, the folks voted on it, and we will respect their vote. But I will say this. We, as senators, sitting on that committee, are not going to be the first to put pencil to paper or run a computer. We want to hear from the public. We want it to be very open, and we want their input prior to, and let them give us guidance. They're the ones that elect us. They're the ones that pass 5 and 6, and I feel like that they are in charge.
Okay, let's take a look at just one of the district maps, and this is for the state legislature from the Escambia County, Northwest Florida. It shows districts. You can see on the screen there. It shows the one district that serves Pensacola was District 3 with Clay Ford's district now, right? And it goes from Pensacola, but just around that, a district that wraps around that, District 2, seems to be drawn for. It looks kind of strange to see that wrap, that sort of donut wrap around the city of Pensacola. Now, do you think that those lines, how would this law, how would your approach, what kind of impact would it have on lines like that?
Great question, Lloyd. Great question, because remember that Amendment 5 and Amendment 6 say no line can be drawn with the intent of favoring or disfavoring any incumbent or any political party. You just mentioned that we have a state representative who is an incumbent. So imagine if we tried to move those lines around in a way that might disfavor him. Imagine if you had the donut district, District 2 as you described it, and imagine if we move those lines around in a way that might favor or disfavor an incumbent or the Republican Party or the Democratic Party or any other party. Imagine the difficulty doing that. Now, we're going to do our best, as Senator Evers said. The voters voted for it. But we also then have to bear in mind that we're required to have contiguous districts. You know, we can't have part of the district here and part of the district in Bay County for a House member. They have to be as compact as feasible so that you don't have a district that runs 150 miles down the coast in order to pick up, folks who might otherwise be able to be in a community of interest closer together. It creates a real problem. And remember, intent is in the Constitution. No line should be drawn with the intent. So Senator Evers and I are members of the Reapportionment Committee of the Senate. If we were to tell you on this program that we have an intent to fix what you described as that problem, that by itself could be grounds for litigation. It's kind of complicated.
It gets very complicated.
And that's exactly the reason that we don't want to be the first out there. We want to allow the residents in the state of Florida to actually sit down at their home computers, look at the data themselves, let them bring the beginnings to us, and then we'll look at it after that.
The lines that you move are going to have real world impact, though, will they not, on the way the congressional delegation looks, the way the Florida House and Senate look. There's a possible argument to be made over every single change, isn't there?
Absolutely. And that's one of the things that we have to be very cautious about, is that very reason that somebody will be able to throw it in court. And what we're trying to do is be as open as we possibly can, allowing our own constituents to draw the maps as best they can to where it's kept out of court and we are not thrown in the turmoil.
Will Northwest Florida, looking at it provincially somewhat here, will Northwest Florida stand to benefit from the reapportionment?
Well, it's hard to say. First, we have to get the block-by-block census data, because we know that Northwest Florida has grown in the past 10 years, but what we don't know is how much more or less have we grown than, say, other parts of the state. We have, anecdotal information from here and there, but we don't have the Census Bureau block-by-block data until late April or early May, and then we'll know. So we don't know whether congressional districts here would shrink because there are more people in less land, or whether they would expand. But you're right, when you move one line for one of our 27 congressional districts, that will have a domino effect on lines across the state of Florida. So wherever you start drawing, if you start at Perdido Key and count 700,000 people and draw a line and say that's the first district, you're going to have an impact on the districts that are down in South Florida because they're all interlocked. Now, this isn't something that's done in a back room. It's not something that's done by politicians who are there by themselves, serving themselves. Every step of the way, as Greg says, will be done in public. And then when we do have maps to propose, after all these public hearings, after hearing from folks on the internet, then we go to the state Supreme Court. They have an opportunity to say, is this good or bad? Does this comply with the state constitution? Then we have to go to the federal level and have our plans pre-cleared. We may get different answers from different levels of government. And all of that has to happen before we're ready to start on the 2012 election cycle. So you may have people running for Congress, running for the State House, running for the State Senate in districts that haven't even been drawn yet. So you really don't know what district you're running in or who your state senator or state rep or congressman might be. So there's a lot of flux in the matter for the next few months.
So you might be going door to door on some street where you're not even representing that district anymore.
Well, that's very true. You've got House members at the time that I served in the House, we had 135,000, and I went through the reapportionment in 2002 when that little C that you see on that map, actually my District 1 actually came down and was across the northern portion of it. And then it was decided that C be put in there and placed, and then Representative Ford would represent, or at that time it was Representative Benson, would represent downtown Pensacola and Gulf Breeze. And what, at that particular time, our main interest was to try to give each of the counties as many of the representatives and senators as we possibly could to give them more of an influence when they went to Tallahassee. So there's a lot of difference in 2002 and what 2012 is going to look like.
If you just joined us, I'm Lloyd Patterson here on CTC tonight, connecting the community, talking about the reapportionment process, which is just starting as a result of the last census. Our guests tonight, two senators from the area who have a major role to play in the reapportionment process, Senator Don Gates and Senator Greg Evers. Senator Gates is the chair of the Senate Committee on Reapportionment. Democrats in Florida feel that they've been treated unfairly in recent years. They point out that here they have a lead in voter registration in a state, yet their representation isn't reflected in the congressional delegation or in the state house or the state senate.
Well,
politics
is supposed to be fair in terms of everybody having an opportunity to participate and run for office, but there's no guarantee that you're going to win. You got to have a better candidate, a better campaign, a better message. So Florida's a purple state. It's not a blue state or a red state. It's a purple state. But we have 28 Republican senators and 12 Democratic senators. Yet Barack Obama won 20 of the 40 Senate districts when he ran for president. So Democrats can win those districts. We have a number of Republicans who are elected in districts that have a majority of Democrats. But what I would say to my Democratic colleagues is, with all due respect, we had the better candidate, and so we won. So you don't get the guaranteed result you want, but you ought to be guaranteed a free and open and fair chance to compete.
Looking at the congressional boundaries, considering that, there are some who say we are now looking at a situation where one member of Congress represents some 700,000 Americans. At the beginning of 100 years ago, one representative represented 200,000 citizens. Do you think it's time to make the House bigger?
I don't know. That's a political hot button when you talk about us getting involved in the political process as far as expanding. You know, the way that our forefathers had set everything up has worked pretty well for over 200 years. And I don't think I want to go back and recut the cloth.
You don't want to tinker with it.
I don't want to really tinker with it.
But is there an argument to be made, Senator Gates, that in this era with 300+ million Americans, that one person representing 700,000 people just doesn't work well for democracy? Do you think that there's a case to be made?
Well, there's probably a case to be made, but I haven't heard anybody say that the answer to Washington's problems is to have more elected congressmen in Washington. I haven't heard that yet. But back when a member of Congress represented 200,000 or 300,000 people, they had to get in a car and they had to drive from little town to little town, from farm to campaign, to talk with their constituents. They talked on the radio when there was radio, but there wasn't a radio until the 1920s. There wasn't television used in politics effectively until the late 1950s and 1960s. Now, Lloyd, we have social networking. My son, Matt, is a state representative. He communicates with thousands of his constituents every day with Facebook and Twitter. He's getting his old man involved in that stuff now. We have communications devices that allow us to listen to the voters and be closer to the voters now than we did 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 years from now. I don't think I have any excuses representing 480,000 people in Northwest Florida for not being available to them, for not communicating with them. Greg and I sit on our computers every night and answer hundreds of emails. That's not an option that people had 10 or 15 years ago. So I agree with Greg. I think our founders, I don't know if they saw the internet coming, maybe they didn't know Al Gore was going to invent it, but I think the system is set up to work, and we have more tools now to communicate, to know what people are thinking.
Wouldn't this also be somewhat unpopular with the incumbents, because if you add to the House, then will you not be diluting the power of the people who are in office now?
Well, Lloyd, the way I feel about it from a personal standpoint is the fact that if you add more members to Congress, what are we doing? We're doing just exactly the opposite from what my constituents tell me. They don't want bigger government. They want smaller government. And by just continuing to add on, because every time you add a congressman, you add an aide or you add some other portion that goes along with that capacity. So why would we want to increase? I mean, the national debt is already soaring out of sight. Why don't we concentrate on reducing the debt and reducing and give the members of Congress and the Senate on the national level an opportunity to bring it back under control, because it has run awry for the past couple of years.
Do you think that when it's all said and done and the 2012 elections roll around, and good grief, we're already seeing lots of stories about who's going to be in the race, the front runners, it's started already. Do you think that by the time that it's all said and done, that this area will be better off in Congress, in the Florida House, in the Florida Senate? Well,
let me say, I agree with Greg that that Northwest Florida will benefit, and all of Florida will benefit from having more members of Congress. Mm-hmm. But if I could just be personal for a second, I think we're well represented by Congressman Jeff Miller and our new Congressman Steve Sutherland. I don't think we could have better representatives in the U.S. House of Representatives. And now we've got Marco Rubio in the Senate, and I think soon, and I apologize for being partisan, we'll replace Bill Nelson with Mike Aradopoulos. So I think that Florida is positioned as never before to have an influence on national policy. And it's Greg's job and my job and the job of all of us on the Reapportionment Committee to make sure every Floridian has an opportunity to participate in drawing these lines so that they make sense, so that everyone has a fair opportunity to compete in politics. And we look forward to having all the input we can get from the people of Florida so that Florida once again can be a national model for fairness in redistricting.
In our last couple of minutes here, I wanted to be sure to ask you about how times have changed since you came into office. You both have extensive political experience. It was thought that if you had more people in Washington representing Florida, more powerful representatives from this area in Tallahassee, that they'd really be able to bring home the bacon. But the dynamic is somewhat changed, where you have it's not quite the same easy to bring home the bacon, is it, at a time when people are saying you've got to cut spending?
Well, first of all,
they want bacon, but they don't want to.
Well, my folks are telling me, you know, don't worry about bringing home the bacon. Just don't take any more from me, because the government has to take it. And I've got businesses that's saying, get the monkey off my back. Look, government does not create jobs. It's entrepreneurship that we give through what we do by taking away the restrictions that the entrepreneurs are under right now, small business, with the regulations that they're under. If we can get that off their back, you will see a boom even here in the Panhandle, because there's some great things that's going to be happening here in the Panhandle in the next 3 months. So, I mean, it's really going to put folks, honest and truly, back to work. The governor said he would help create 700,000 jobs, and I believe he means it. I know that Senator Gates and I are going to work towards that goal.
Senator Gates, do you have to be careful about how you talk about bringing home benefits to the district? Everybody wants new roads fixed, roads built, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, we're all a little bit bipolar about that. You know, we want less government. As Jeb Bush told me one time, he said accountability is great until it knocks on your door. And you know, it's less government, except please protect my program. I think now we really have an opportunity, as Senator Evers says, to go through the budget with the tweezers. When you have $3.62 billion less to spend than you had the previous year, you have a spending problem. And as Mike Aradopoulos has said, we can either raise taxes or cut spending. We're going to cut spending. So we can go through the budget with the tweezers, look for opportunities to make government more effective and more efficient, and I think that's what the people of Northwest Florida want.
Senator Gates, Senator Evers, thank you for being with us. Good luck with you in Tallahassee as you redraw those boundaries for political purposes. Anyway, thank you for watching tonight. I'm Lloyd Patterson for PBS WSRE. Good night.